Hi, this is Greg with HVAC Solutions, and we will begin the webinar in just a few minutes. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Greg Jutris. I'm a product manager with HVAC Solutions. Basically what that means is I work for TEC and the National Excelsior Corporation. We are a HVAC distributor based in the Midwest. Today we're going to talk about RGF and indoor air quality. During this presentation, feel free to type in a question on your screen and I will do my best to get it answered. If I somehow miss it during the presentation, I will get you an answer by the end of the day. So with that, let's get rolling. I say the agenda for today is to talk a little bit about the company so you can get a sense of who they are. We'll talk a little bit about indoor air quality. We'll go over some older technology and then newer technology and some of the applications for that. This is a picture of RGF's headquarters. They are based out of Florida, and so they're a US-based manufacturer. Here's a quick snapshot of all the different things that RGF is involved with. We think of them mostly as, air treatment, indoor air quality, but you can see here that they do a lot with wastewater, food sanitization, mold remediation, those types of things. And the reason I put this up here is because this is a technology that is out there and we're around it all the time. It's just not that we don't necessarily see it. So what I mean by that is, if you grab a Coke at Subway, you've had ice that goes through RGF's process. If you've been on a Disney cruise line, you've been on a cruise ship that has RGF technology on it. If you've had a Tyson chicken breast, you've had a chicken breast that's been through this process. So it's in a lot of places that, is in our daily lives. We just don't see it. It's kind of in the background. There's a, I guess what I'll say, guys overseas, a lot of times when they're looking to get clean drinking water, a lot of times it's going through that RGF process to make sure there's no nasty things in the water. RGF has been around since 1985, so they're not really a fly-by-night company. They've been around for a while. Started in food and water. They've got a lot of patents out there. And the company motto is leave no chemical behind. And I say that because they're really dealing with the chemical aspects of things, which is very different than a lot of other indoor air quality products we could be talking about. So if I take a step back and we start with the basics of indoor air quality, I can usually put indoor air quality problems into one of three buckets. And those buckets are particulate, microbials, or gases. If you can figure out what type of problem you're dealing with, you're that much closer to diagnosing the problem and then giving the owner a solution for that problem. So particulates, microbials, and gases. We try to remember that by PMG. So what is a particulate? A particulate is that dander, the dust, pollen. It's what I like to call the things that will make you sneeze. Microbials. These are those single-cell living organisms. I like to call them the things that will make you sick. So if particulate is making you sneeze, microbials are making you sick. We're talking about viruses, bacteria, mold spores, those kinds of things. Gases. Gases are, I'm going to say, the things that you can smell. Now, I say that, and that's a real general term, because in HVAC, we know that there are some gases that you cannot smell, and they are deadly gases. You know, carbon monoxide comes to mind. That is a gas, you cannot smell it, and it can kill you. So when I'm talking about gases, generally I'm talking about odors or VOCs. So the things that you can smell that are offensive. When I say the word VOCs, or the acronym VOCs, it stands for volatile organic compound. And the poster child for VOCs is formaldehyde. And that's because it's everywhere. It's extremely difficult to get away from formaldehyde. It's in, you know, if you look around, it's in the carpet you're standing on. It's at the desk you're sitting at. It's probably in the chair you're sitting on. It's in the paint on the walls, the ceiling tiles. Formaldehyde is used as an adhesive, so it's used in a lot of things that we bring into our spaces, and it off-gasses. And when it off-gasses, you can smell it, and a lot of times it smells like fresh carpet. When I say fresh, I mean new carpet, or a new house, or a new car. That, I'll say, wonderful smell that you're smelling that says, I just got a new car, it smells really great. What you're actually smelling is VOCs, and VOCs are dangerous. So what do VOCs do? You know, if you read this list, it's coughing, wheezing, shortness of breath. It sounds like you're sick. You know, those are direct symptoms of being sick. So VOCs can make you not feel very good. And they're everywhere. You know, we talk about how much stuff we are trapping inside the space. It's a lot of bad stuff. And we breathe an awful lot. You start looking at it, we breathe somewhere between 6 and 12 liters a minute. And the difference there is, you know, if you're sitting here at a desk like I am, probably closer to that 6 liters a minute. If you're running a marathon, you're probably closer to that 12 liters a minute. So it really depends on activity level. But what I want you to think about is if you were drinking 6 to 12 liters of water a minute, how much would you care about the quality of that water you're putting into your body? Inside the air we breathe, there's also a lot of really small solids. But when you when you add them up over the course of a day, we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 tablespoons of solids that we breathe in every day. It's an awful lot, and it causes a lot of problems, especially with long term. If I move into building specific problems, the first one that comes to mind is sick building syndrome. Sick building syndrome is where a person or a group of people go to work and they feel sick. They leave and they feel better. Now, I'm not talking about a Monday morning hangover or something like that, but I'm talking about a real problem where every day this person is not feeling good. They leave maybe just for a lunch break, or they leave at the end of the day, and they feel better. That building would then be classified as a sick building. So at that point, we go into that building and we try to figure out what the problem is. And if we walk around and we find that the copy machine is producing a lot of ozone, it's producing a lot of VOCs. We found the problem, so we can, well, I'll say we have a lot of different solutions we could offer. We could move the people away from the copy machine. We could move the copy machine. we could bring in fresh air, or we could add a air purifier to get rid of the VOCs. All of those will work, but my point is that's not really a sick building. The problem is that that copy machine is too close to people. We're not getting rid of the VOCs in ozone that may be causing problems. Now, if I walk into that same building and the same people are not feeling good, right, but I can't find the problem. We know there is one, but I can't figure out what it is. Well, in that case, it is a sick building, and in those cases, you still have solutions. You can bring in fresh air, dilute some of the VOCs. We've used air purifiers to get rid of the sick building, and it's helped an awful lot. Some other problems that we've seen is dirty sock syndrome. So this is where you walk into a house or a commercial space and it smells kind of like a locker room. It's just musty. And 9 times out of 10, the owner's going to tell you, man, I've got mold somewhere. And I know I have mold because I can smell it. What I can tell you is that 9 out of 10 times, it's usually not mold. More often than not, it's bacteria. And more specifically, it's bacteria on the coil. And what's that bacteria doing? It's eating the stuff that's on the coil. It's decomposing or breaking down the stuff that's stuck on the coil. And when it does that, it creates a smell. That smell smells like an old sock. The problem with bacteria is that even when there's large colonies growing on an HVAC coil, you can't see it. They're microscopic. So even millions of them across that coil, you can't see it. It could look pretty clean, and it could be the source of your problem. So my point is, the RGF product has done a great job at not only getting rid of the odors associated with dirty sock syndrome, it's also getting rid of the cause, the bacteria on the coil. If we talk a little bit about older technology, UV lights have been around since the 1800s, actually. They started getting used in HVAC systems in the 50s. But what UV lights do, they do a great job at cleaning an object. So in this case, an object that is not moving, it does a great job at cleaning. What it doesn't do a great job at is traveling well. So what does that mean? You go, 5 feet down the ductwork, and the UV light is not doing a whole lot to clean that space. So it does a great job at cleaning something that's not moving, but you move a little bit away from it, and it's not doing a great job. So in this example, if that circle is the UV light, you go just 3 inches away from that UV bulb, you've lost 90% of its power. Now, does that mean it's not doing anything? No. It just means that it needs a longer time, longer exposure time to do what it needs to do, because it loses power the further you get away from it. This is a picture of what a coil setup would look like, residentially speaking, if you were going to clean every square inch of that coil. I don't think I've ever seen 6 UV lights in a residential system, ever. It's overkill. I think the most we ever use is 2, maybe 3. All right, so I keep talking about the RGF product and what it does. And as you can see, this product is kind of glowing. So it does have a UV light in it. But the UV light is not designed to clean a coil like a standard UV light would be. This UV light is designed only to create a chemical reaction. That chemical reaction is called photohydroionization. That's a long word, and please don't use that across the kitchen table, because homeowners' eyes glaze over a little bit. You don't know what you're talking about. So the process, we call it Phi for short. So it's the RGF Phi cell. In that process, that photohydroionization creates hydroperoxides. That's what we're doing. And what these hydroperoxides do, they go out into the space. They not only clean the air, but they also clean the surface. And the surface is the most important word on this slide. Why? Because when you think about surface, you think about the telephone. You think about the keyboard for your computer. You can think about the doorknobs, the things we touch that eventually get into your body and make you sick. That is where we are cleaning stuff, not just in the air, but also on the surface. One of the newest phenomenons in the indoor air quality industry is what they're calling HTO. It stands for highly touched objects. So what are highly touched objects? Well, it could be a million things. But let's take a doorknob for example. But how long does C. diff live on a doorknob? Well, up to 5 months. E. coli, 16 months. I'm not going to go through all these, but you can see they're not there for, minutes or hours. It's days and months. So these guys are hanging around highly touched objects for a very long period of time. One thing we're always worried about is when people sneeze. And we're generally worried about being in that, I'll say, danger area of 1 to 3 feet, where we're going to get hit with what they call droplets. I like to call it wet nastiness. That's just me. So what we're showing here, though, is that most of the large and even small droplets hit the ground within 5 feet of the sneeze. What's not hitting the ground is the extremely small droplets. So you would have to, I'll say, be worried if somebody was sick, they sneeze, the large droplets are hitting the ground. The small ones, which contain the infection, may never hit the ground. So they're suspended indefinitely. So it's not only the next room or the room you're in you need to worry about. These are actually small enough to go through the return, through the equipment, and back into the space, and they get pushed around an entire building. And the other problem with extremely small droplets is that because they are so small, they're able to make it down into the deepest, darkest parts of the lungs, where they sit and make people sick. So RGF created the sneeze test. And what they did, they put this guy in a room and had him sneeze. And when they added the RGF product to that room, they found a reduction of 78% of that wet nastiness before the sneeze got 3 feet away. And sneezes are coming out extremely quickly, sometimes excess of 100 miles per hour. Every year we're dealing with some sort of new bug or new flu. The media grabs a hold of something and it's the next big thing this year. Did you get your flu shots? So I'll kind of hype around it. A couple years ago, we went through the H1N1 scare. We were actually working with hospitals, putting additions in emergency wings for H1N1. But what you can see here is that the RGF product, third-party tested, over 99% inactivation rate. It's killing H1N1 relatively quickly and efficiently. SARS. So this is going back even a little bit before H1N1, but this was that bird flu where people were wearing masks on, airports and airplanes. RGF was accredited by the Chinese government for keeping the kill rate down because they put these in all their transportation buildings and government hubs. So it's quite a statement for RGF. Norwalk virus. So this is AKA the cruise ship virus. This is the one where 1,000 people go out on a ship and 800 come back because they got Norwalk when they come back sick. So it's extremely contagious. And the problem is that this one is surface borne. So if you think, if all of a sudden there's an outbreak of Norwalk on a cruise ship, what do you do to get rid of it? Well, I can tell you that most times they grab some bleach and a rag and they start wiping everything down. Problem is, it doesn't do anything to get rid of the Norwalk. All it does is stir it up and it goes and lives somewhere else. So it moved from the elevator button, to the railing outside. It's impossible to get rid of. That's why it's extremely contagious. So that is why Disney Cruise Lines has RGF product on all their ships. They've even got, Mickey Mouse shaped RGF units where they can't get ductwork in. Carnival Cruise Lines has it. And there's another, I'd say two or three major cruise ships that put this on every ship because nobody wants to be the ship that, has outbreaks of Norwalk. And they have to report that at the end of the year. Nobody wants to be that guy. All right, so Mrsa. This is that staph infection on steroids. So this is where you go to the hospital for some knee surgery and you end up dying because you get Mrsa. So Mrsa is an infection. And if I was to ask you, with this colder weather coming into Chicago, has anybody gotten a sinus infection lately? And if you have, what do you do to get rid of a sinus infection? Well, you take antibiotics, right? Well, you would normally get rid of Mrsa by giving it antibiotics. Problem is, it's got that little word resistant in it, which means it really doesn't care if you give it antibiotics. So it's extremely difficult to get rid of, and that's why it's such a problem. And we see this this staph infection and Mrsa, not only in hospitals where, of course, there's a lot of it there, but really anywhere where I'll say there's mats involved, anywhere where people are wrestling or doing gymnastics or sports, almost of any kind, because you get, you're sweaty. It's got a good place to live on a mat or a locker room floor. You might have cuts and scrapes. It's got easy access. And the RGF does a great job at getting rid of Mrsa. And then here's some mold. You can see it's getting rid of mold spores. Clearly, though, if you've got a wall that looks like the picture on the right, you got to get rid of it. We will continue to get rid of spores, but even if it kills that mold on the wall, the wall's going to look bad. So it has to be removed. We have had great success with RGF getting rid of what I'll call light, musty mold, like storage units, you know, where it's just a little bit of a dampness. You got cardboard so the mold can grow, and we can kill it before it ever has the chance to grow. Now, mold is not it's not the word of gold that it once was. I think we realize mold for what it is. But what I'm bringing up here is that there are new molds, or I should say old molds in new places. So we've got this mold called C. gatti, and this is a mold that's moving from the south to the north in places like Chicago, and even more north into Canada, where it gets pretty darn cold. But this guy is considered a warmer climate mold, and it generally grows on trees. The nice thing about this is that you can't pass it from person to person. The spore actually has to be inhaled for it to cause any harm. And this whole phenomenon from this mold moving from the south to the north is kind of being blamed on global warming. Now, I don't know if I subscribe to that, but it's clearly moving from south to north for some reason. The problem with this mold is that once it's inhaled, 2 months later, you start to see symptoms. Now, I want to put that into perspective. If there's somebody who has cat allergies, walks into a house where there's a couple cats, they're going to know it immediately. They're going to say, man, I can't breathe, my chest is getting tight, my eyes are watering, you know, body's telling them to get out of there, right? But with this allergy, once you inhale this mold spore, you don't see symptoms for 2 months. Now, what are the symptoms? You start to get infections. You start to get fevers. You're confused. Headache, chest pains, shortness of breath. You don't feel good. But what I want you to imagine is going to the doctor, giving them this list of symptoms. You know, he might give you some antibiotics. He might tell you, you know, take 2 aspirin. Who knows? But the problem is it doesn't get diagnosed very often because you have that 2-month lag time. Once they do find out that you have C. gatti, right, it takes 6 months of taking medicine to get rid of it. So a new mold coming to the north causes a lot of problems. It's being very tough to diagnose. Even once it's diagnosed, it takes forever to get better. I'm just pointing this out there because sometimes mold gets dismissed, and there are still real problems with mold in the north. So the RGF product, how does this thing work? Well, we send out hydroperoxides into the space. So that hydroperoxide will collide with some sort of a cell. Maybe it's a VOC, maybe it's a virus or a bacteria, and it will oxidize that cell. So we're literally ripping out the electron or the neutron and rendering that cell harmless. I like to use generic words like killing it, but we're not actually killing that cell. We're changing the state into something that is not harmful. So it was a harmful cell, now it's a non-harmful cell. Now that word hydroperoxide sounds a lot like hydrogen peroxide. That's because they're very similar. So when Mom used to put hydrogen peroxide on a skinned knee, why did she do that? Well, she did that to, you know, keep all the germs out, to kill the bacteria, to make sure no infection took hold on that scrape. Guys, we're doing the same thing for the air and the surface in a home or a building. How do we do it? Well, I said before that we have a UV light, but the UV light is only there to create a reaction. So around that UV bulb is a cell, and the cell is white. Now, it's not painted white, to look pretty, right? We're putting this on the inside ductwork, so nobody's going to ever see it anyway. But that white paint has 4 semi-precious metals on it: silver, titanium, copper, and rhodium. So when the UV light hits those 4 semi-precious metals, it creates the hydroperoxides that go out into the space and kill the germs, viruses, bacteria, any kind of wet nastiness that may be floating around in a space. So the unit we use 9 out of 10 times is called the 212GA. This unit is good for systems up to 6,500 CFM. It doesn't use a lot of power. It's kind of like a night light. It is 9 inches long, and the cell is going to last 25,000 hours. That's basically 3 years, and then you have to replace that cell. This unit comes with a plug, so you can plug it in and take 115, 120 volts, or you could cut the plug and send 220 right to it. It has an automatic switching transformer that will accept anything from 150 to 220. If you need 24 volts, we do offer that unit, but we do not stock it. But it is a separate unit. So here is my grade school interpretation of what we're doing. You've got a furnace kind of below, you've got a coil. We mount this thing in the plenum above the coil, and we plug it in. When it's running, we create hydroperoxides. I like to call them scrubbing bubbles. Some people like to call them Pac-Man, whatever. So the blower kicks on. We send the hydroperoxides through the space via the ductwork, saturates the air, covers the surface, and then some of those start to come back through the return, and we are actually cleaning the coil. We're keeping that coil free from bacteria, mold, and anything that may want to grow on it. Some other units that RGF offers, we have a smaller unit, which is good from anywhere from 500 to 2,000 CFM. This is a 5-inch bulb. Now, people ask me all the time, where would you use that thing? I said, well, I like to use it where the load is low. So, well, what do you mean the load is low? Well, let's take a 1,500 square foot house, and let's put a single guy in there, but he's got a dog, and he does a lot of cooking, and every once in a while he's got a poker night. That unit at 1,500 square feet, I would probably put them into the 9-inch or maybe even the 9-inch high output because of the poker night. So there's a lot of load. It's got stuff to attack all the time. Let's take that same 1,500 square foot house, single guy, but he's never there. There's no pets, there's no kids, the guy barely ever cooks there. That house has very little load. There's not much for it to do, so go with the smaller one. After that, we go into 14-inch units and high output units, 26,000 CFM. We can couple them together. We've done 40,000 CFM air handlers. A lot of different options there. A few other units we've got. The first one on the left, I'll say top left, is a plug-in unit. We like to use this a lot for like conference rooms, where you got 12 people around a table and somebody's always sneezing or coughing. It's good for that. It's good for basements where there may not be any supply air duct runs down there, or maybe it smells a little musty. It's great for that. The unit below that, that's called our mini. I like to call it the low profile unit. It's good for PTACs, fan coils, unit ventilators, small places where you got a hard time fitting anything in. And then the one on the right is an ice machine unit. Now, I'm going to assume that people here aren't doing a lot of refrigeration. If you are, great. You know, it definitely takes care of all that black and green nasty mold that grows on ice. If you've ever seen one of those, you might have a hard time grabbing ice out of an ice machine again. But I bring this up because guys have done some pretty creative things with this, where this unit mounts on a wall. You can see the 4 screws go into a wall, and then it's got 2 basically rubber hoses that would generally go into the back of an ice machine. Well, what they've done, they've taken those 2 cables, run them into the back of a butcher's case. So now the butcher gets an extra 3 days out of his T-bones. It's worth a lot of money to him. Why? Because the bacteria is not eating the meat, right? It's giving me the bloody one, not the brown one. So he gets an extra few days. This one here is the newest addition to the RGF family. This is a magnet-mounted 24-volt RGF unit. So I say it's perfect for rooftops. So you go into a rooftop, it's magnet-mounted, so you just put it by the blower housing. You run 24 volts to it. They come in different sizes, but it's made the installation a lot easier. Before, we were either trying to put it inside the space in the ductwork, or we were building NEMA 3 boxes around the head of the unit, and this saves a lot of that labor. If it's more than 20 minutes, I'd be surprised. So here's the addition, or another addition to the RGF family. This one's called the REME, R-E-M-E. If you ask me, it looks like it should go on the back of a motorcycle or something. This one's actually pretty cool to look at. So REME stands for Reflective Electromagnetic Energy. Don't expect you to remember that. This one only comes in 2 sizes, so it's actually a lot easier to quote. You've got the standard, which is up to 6,500 CFM, and then we've got a 10,000 CFM one if you're dealing with some larger commercial, let's say, call it casino type applications. And what does this guy do? It does everything that the RGF product does, plus it adds ions. So what do the ions do? Ions go after particulate. So when I say go after particulate, their goal in life is to make particulate bigger. So it attracts one particulate to another particulate, and all that does, it makes it heavier, it makes it bigger, and it makes your filter much more efficient. So we're not killing particulate because, let's face it, they're not alive anyway. But what we are doing is creating ions. It makes particulate attract to one another. They get bigger, and it makes the filter more efficient. Word of caution, if you do sell this unit, give them another filter because they're going to need it within the next couple of weeks, because you're starting to grab much more stuff out of the air, and that filter always seems to load up that much quicker. So here is a look at what the REME does versus what the RGF cell does. They do basically the same thing, except for the REME will make particulates bigger. The cell doesn't do anything for particulate. Here's the commercial air purification system. It comes in two sizes, 5,000 square foot or the 1,500 square foot. This is kind of like the residential systems on steroids. It pumps out a ton of hydroperoxides. I like to use this one for nail salons or applications where you cannot breathe in that space because it's so bad. It puts out a ton. The other thing I like about this is that you have options for these little filters that go on the bottom of the unit, the return air, I'll call it, for that unit. A lot of different options. They're basic. Well, the first two are particulate, big particulate, small particulate. After that, it's mercury. You might ask me, well, where would you ever worry about mercury? Well, a lot of times dentists' office have to worry about mercury in the air. You know, they're putting that in your teeth, but sometimes it gets, you know, airborne. Smoke, VOCs, that one's pretty obvious. The radon, I tell most of the guys who are in Illinois to stay away from it because you have to be licensed. So I don't really suggest the radon filter. But we do use the fats, oil, and grease filters a lot, especially when we're dealing with restaurants, fast food places, anywhere where they've got a lot of that grease. And as we get into larger units, you can put units in a rack system, or you can have the you can do a custom one with much larger bulbs, that kind of thing. So those are custom applied products. If you've got something like that, be more than happy to help you with it. So as I start wrapping this up, the residential opportunity is very different with this indoor air quality product than other indoor air quality products. Other ones I'd be hammering home, you know, allergies, asthma. With this product, we're really starting to deal with, you know, not wanting to get sick, where people don't want to smell something. Commercial opportunity. Orland Park Schools. So this is one, I'll call it the south side of Chicago. 58 Guardian Air units. Year over year, 15 to 20% reduction in absenteeism. Why? Because Johnny wasn't given what he had to Jane. And they've since bought a whole lot more RGF units since then. Nursing home. We did work with this one because they were trying to reduce the odor. There was an interesting smell, that nursing home. But what they found was that after it was all said and done, it saved them almost $100,000 a year because they weren't having to replace sheets. They weren't having to replace carpet. They didn't have to buy Lysol. Their people, you know, weren't getting sick. They weren't having to leave as often. So, good story there. When we talk about Mrsa, you know, in hospitals, what does one less lawsuit cost to a hospital? Yeah, way more than the product cost. So some other opportunities. I don't know how you can't walk down the street and see 10 different places that could use this. Daycares, you know, it's a perfect example. I mean, there's all kinds of diapers in there. Plus, those kids are like little petri dishes themselves. All right, so talked an awful lot about where you can use this thing and applications for it. But where not to use it is, if not just as important, more important than where to use it. We don't want to use this anywhere where they're taking cultures. I found out the hard way that everybody's cured, right? It kills everything. The next thing, anywhere they want the smell. So if the wife is a big fan of pumpkin spice candles, yeah, you probably don't want to use this, or you want to turn it off if you want to smell the pumpkin spice candles. This time of year, always get complaints. man, I can't smell Thanksgiving turkey cooking. Well, okay, you got to turn it off then. Or freshly cut Christmas trees. If you want to smell that freshly cut Christmas tree, you got to turn it off. So this unit does not distinguish between a good smell and a bad smell. It gets rid of them all, regardless. Noxious gases. I run into this probably once a quarter where there's some sort of a gas out there that can kill people. Recently, it's been a lot of call it eye doctors where they do the LASIK. Well, anyway, that laser they use is run by a gas, and when they got to change tanks, a little bit of that releases into the air. So they're always looking for something to deal with that. And my point is, if you're dealing with a noxious gas, get an engineer to sign off on the solution for that. I don't want the responsibility. And then the last thing is anywhere where they work with yeast. So this is mostly bakeries or bread, those kind of things. But don't forget about beer. You know, when you lose a vat of beer, that's a bad day. So where not to use the RGF product is just as important as where to use it. So just remember that. Additional training. This is our training center in Melrose Park. There's a lot of equipment that is installed, can be serviced. If you ever want to see it, let us know. And that's all I've got. So I'll stick on here for just another moment. If there's any other questions, let me know, and I will get them answered. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.